Good evening and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for Black in Sistrunk, a virtual panel with some of the artists and designers featured in our exhibition. The Porch is the Tree is the Watering Hole. Hopefully, you've had a chance to check it out. My name is Philip Dunlap. I'm the director of Broward County's Cultural Division, and tonight we're going to take a deeper look into the themes of this exhibition, including the history of the Sistrunk neighborhood, the Black experience within Black neighborhoods, and how the African diaspora is communicated through these artists and their work. But first, I want to introduce our moderator for the evening, Mikhaile Solomon. Mikhaile is a designer and arts advocate with backgrounds in many different arts disciplines, including theater, dance, and architecture. She received her Bachelor of Arts from the University of South Florida in theater arts and her Master's of Architecture from Florida International University. She's the founding director of the Prism Art Fair, which exhibits artists from the African diaspora who reflect global trends in contemporary art. And that's through a blockbuster exhibit that's held during Art Basel in Miami. Now, as an arts leader, Mikhaile is determined to create a more diverse and inclusive arts and culture scene in the city, and we're thrilled to have her as a moderator of this artist panel tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Mikhaile and the artists to treat you well for the rest of the evening. Enjoy.
Thank you so much, Philip, for the warm introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank the Broward Division of Cultural Affairs for inviting myself and all these wonderful artists, and the curator of the exhibition, Dominique Dennis, for inviting me to moderate this panel this evening. And just to give you a sense of what the format of our conversation will be today, we're going to have the night separated into two different groups, beginning with a conversation with Darius Daughtry, Adler Guerrier, and George Gadson. We'll have a small intermission between the groups, and our second group will be inclusive of artists Adrian Chadwick, David I. Muir, and Jermaine Barnes. So to begin our discussion this evening, I'm going to ask all of our panelists to respond to this question. The Porch is the Tree is the Watering Hole is an excavation of the cultural and geographic notes that come together to draw on the Sistrunk community in Fort Lauderdale, a historic Black community named after the legendary Dr. James Franklin Sistrunk. Tell us how your chosen media speaks to the narrative of the Sistrunk community and more broadly the diasporic communities across the country and perhaps even globally. Darius.
Wait, Darius?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we'll start with Darius. All right.
Consensus.
Okay, cool. I'll take that. So, what's interesting is a lot of my family is from the area. So my mother was born in the Sistrunk area. My grandmother lived very close to the library where we are right now. And when I was first born, I grew up for the first couple of years of my life in the area. So there is a connection for me when Dominique, who is the curator, brought this to me, I was super excited to be involved in this project. So my chosen medium in this space is poetry. And what I wanted to do was really connect to the essence of not only Sistrunk and communities like Sistrunk, historically Black communities, but also I wanted to show how those communities and what's happening in these communities connect directly to diasporic themes and just spirituality, the ideas of community and connection that existed. So for me, in my work, I really try to pull those things out and put those on the forefront. Yeah.
And before we continue, I didn't get to give everybody your wonderful intro.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought, so
so that
cool.
people can know who you are.
All right. Hey.
So Darius is a poet. He's a playwright and educator. He's an artist whose main medium is language. Daughtry is the founder and artistic director of Art Prevails Project, a performing arts organization dedicated to cultivating community through the power of storytelling, arts education, and community engagement. Daughtry finds pleasure in asking the questions that take everyone to the heart of the matter. So now we understand your response now with regards to poetry.
Who wrote that? Did I write that? I don't. That's pretty good. I don't know if I wrote
And it was
that.
so beautifully
Yeah.
written. It says everything about who you are.
Yeah.
Something that there's a specific poem that you wrote for this exhibition. It is called "The Wizards of Ours," and it lends a metaphysical, spiritual element to the exhibition that conjures the past, the present, and the future residents of the diasporic spaces. Walk us through your process of creating this piece. Was the composition created in collaboration with the other artists in the exhibition, or was your poem a response to the physical artifacts that you see here?
Yeah. So yes, the answer is yes to all of those.
Yeah.
So when we first started having these discussions about the project, I started just kind of taking notes, as jotting down, doing my own research, and just started walking through the neighborhood and such. And then when Jermaine was brought in, and we started talking about Jermaine Barnes, who who helped design this amazing exhibit. When Jermaine was brought in, and we started talking about the shotgun houses, and we started talking about him connecting the chairs that he made, and that kind of took me back again to thinking of how does the idea of home relate, and what is the thread of that idea from past to present to future. And I kind of wanted to make sure I maintained that throughout the piece. And uh and then also looking at David Muir's and so finally, so I started working on it, and then finally once David had these pictures, then I'm like, okay, cool. Now I have all the ingredients I need to really make this thing pop like it's supposed to pop, right? And so I was able to flesh it out a bit, and yeah. So yeah, and then it's the home, right? So for me, the idea was home, and what does it mean to gather, right? And how do we gather as people, and where do we gather? What does it feel like? What's the purpose? And the title of it is "These Wizards of Ours," echoing the Wizard of Oz, right? And the idea of home, and Dorothy wanted to get back home, but the idea that everything was already within her, and so making that connection for me was important.
Yeah, and in reading it, there was what I really loved about it is that you also get a sense of like even our ancestors. You're speaking to our ancestors there, and you make references to griots. You make references to the djembe drum. You make references to, you even use our colloquial language of today. So it's like a combination of all the different things that makes us who we are from the past, but then also who we are presently, and then projections about who we are or can be in the future.
Absolutely. So like the idea, that's the wizard part of it. Thinking of that is the magic that exists, and the magic of the past, and how that creates the present, and the magic of what's happening right now, whether we see it or not, and maybe whether we even acknowledge it. Because I mentioned, the girl on the street, rolling her neck and everything, right? But there is magic in that, and like, how does that manifest itself into our future, and in just pure celebration of culture.
Beautifully said. Yeah.
Thank you.
And let's move to Adler. So Adler is was born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, lives and works in Miami, Florida. His work has been exhibited in solo and group exhibitions throughout the United States and abroad. Guerrier's practice is best known for works in photography, drawing, and installation that explore the poetics and politics of place. Guerrier received a BFA from New World School of the Arts and the University of Florida. So Adler, I will ask you the same question.
Sure. My process, well, I guess my relationship with Sistrunk was far. From living in Miami and not totally traveling to Broward, this distant land, for a long time. I clearly had to rectify that. But I've done work West Grove, it's Little Haiti, or just neighborhood my parents live in, and trying to excavate that notion of presence against the grid or um, against time as well, which is a sort of different thing, especially within an immigrant narrative, in that we enter the room with others in it, right? It's like it's not a narrative. It's not a narrative of foundation. It's not a narrative of contributing to the making of a place from scratch, but it's a narrative of continuing to participate in, I don't know, the enterprise of the city, the enterprise of here. And residential neighborhoods have a sort of a different participation level compared to the city center, the downtown, and things like that. And for that matter, Black neighborhoods have another participation level within this larger machinery of the city. So these kind of things are interesting for me. And in looking at neighborhoods like West Grove, for example, it seems to be it's a late chapter of West Grove making an argument for its influence within Miami. It's just by sheer numbers, by sheer of other politics, even, or and other sorts of influence. But the invitation to come here in Sistrunk for me was kind of, these are all the questions I had, right? I've clearly come through here before, but I've never came here to study. And so I came by often. I drove through, I walk, I photograph, I try to understand what's still here, what remains in relationship to what was, in relationship to how I understand how South Florida came to be. But what remains actually is sort of the interesting thing. I think the work is so much more about the sort of material that is still in the neighborhood, not necessarily. It doesn't always account for all who have lived here. And so there's a kind of objectified testimony to all the lives that's been here. Sure, maybe the house is gone, it's a lot, but we're talking about spirituality. Human remains in a way. And so this is the kind of thing I try to find. And also thinking about my entry into this project is through the alleyway, which is also not the front view. So that's also an interesting angle, entering both history or where people live or where lives develop against the temporality of city and yeah, the complex Black immigrant life that is here, right? It's like that's what came to the fore while I traveled the city. I mean the neighborhood.
Was entering through the alleyway was that a choice you made, or was it something that you and the curator discussed?
It was part of an invitation, and I also thought it was part of a challenge because the alleyways they're technical and in their usage, and they're not even used that way anymore. So they're both redundant and a kind of downsize in utility, but they still exist. They still connect to backyards. They still connect to where barbecues are being done, where people are swimming in pools, or people just sitting in their own yard in the tree, under a tree. We've been is the view where you may hear a person, but you may not see a person. But nevertheless, you still have to account for that presence. That's very interesting for me because it both introduce a kind of a pseudonymous presence, simultaneously one that is already filled culturally, right? It's like we can, by peeking through, by hearing a syllable or two, by listening what's coming to the radio, one can deduce who's on the other side of
Yeah.
that fence, and within the context of the larger community, that's also very interesting. So it is interesting to rebuild a city in a way. It's not necessarily backwards, but it's sort of a weird internal
Mhm.
indirect thoroughfare,
Mhm.
which is the alleyway. So that was good.
It was good. Well, I just found that was so interesting because this whole entire show is about when I walked into this space. Um, Clearly, home is the driver and the thread, as Darius mentioned. You have here on the ground that Jermaine Barnes' pieces sit on a deconstructed shotgun house, and then you have your element, which is the alleyway, and then George, you have pieces in the exhibition like the door of no return, that is another architectural element of a house, but yours has metaphorical
Hmm.
implications about how we got here as a diaspora community in the first place. So, I think that's a good segue for us to talk to you about you and your practice. Um, George is a multidisciplinary artist, griot, and philosopher of the contemporary African American experience. Gadson discovered his talent for art in 1981 while in search of a means of creative relaxation from the rigors of a demanding banking career. Gadson's body of work includes commissions such as an ornament for the White House Christmas tree, two South Florida Super Bowl bronze commemorative sculptures, the Jim Moran Foundation Award, the African American Achievers Awards, and large scale sculptures for the African American Research Library and Cultural Center and the Urban League of Broward County. So, George, I think I'll ask that you also answer the same question that Darius and Adler um, um, uh, answered a few minutes ago.
Well, I'll start by saying I'm not from the Sistrunk area. I'm actually from Central Florida.
Mhm.
Um, but the inspiration and being really excited about participating in this exhibition was when the whole concept of home, we'll just put it out there, um, that I had actually some time ago had really gotten this idea to create some type of work that speaks to where I came from, and that being this theme resonated so much with me because I was raised in a small town um, with shotgun houses, and um, so the work for me was like, okay, this is my opportunity, and to tell the narrative of when I was a kid and how, indeed, my grandmother lived in a shotgun house. We were raised in a shotgun house across the street from her, and so this one particular piece speaks to that. But I think at the same time, I was in that the desire is to for those who had a chance to view the work created is to encourage all of us to uh, be it a shotgun house or not a shotgun house, is to look for those things within our community that allows us to have memories and to tell stories about those things that came from our community. So the door of separation was really one that was as a result of segregation, and growing up as a kid. The metal, the sculpture piece there was, rebirth of cool. My mom and dad, did farming, and we had a garden in our backyard, and so the plow that was used, years after my mom passed away, the plow that was used was actually still back in the storage shed. So I dismantled dismantled it, and the pieces that you see are pieces from the plow. So again, looking back in terms of storytelling and how can we preserve those stories, and oftentimes when I was a kid and my relatives would sit on the porch. We used to call it the stoop. Also, just sit on the porch or the stoop, and they would tell stories. So here we are, and now in the 21st century, we too can tell stories. Uh, we're not in shotgun houses anymore, but nonetheless, we can. So, not being from Sistrunk, at the same time, what happened in the Sistrunk area, and we all know the history of Sistrunk and how rich it is, and having those shotgun houses experiences that existed, um, those narratives being told, hopefully, still today. So that's a little bit of how I approach this project, and knowing that across the world, globally, there are men and women of color who can somehow relate in some form or fashion to home and whatever that environment was, and hopefully being able to tell stories and have narratives about their home experience.
And you and Adler worked on pieces together for the exhibition.
Yes.
And there's a piece that I'm looking at ahead of me that's a fairly literal expression of home. It's a maquette that's made with um, pieces of butterscotch
Yes.
and tin and etc. And you mentioned earlier when we were having our off the air conversation, you described that piece. And so if you wouldn't mind going in a little bit into how you and Adler collaborated. And Adler, please, I invite you to also chime in, and how it was working together.
Well, first of
on
all,
these pieces.
I have to say that I just really respect Adler and his work. Um, and so he and I had never met until um, the curator of the show, Dominique, asked me if I knew him, and I said no, I don't know him. And she says, "Well, I think you two should get together." So I invited him to my studio, and it was just phenomenal. And when he saw my work, and he already had the vision of what he was looking to do, um, I was really open to exploring how we can collaborate together, and the manner in which he displays his work and my work together. I've never had my work displayed the manner in which he's done it, and it's unbelievable. It looks great. But the piece that you were referencing there is called Butterscotch, and the story behind it is, well, first of all, it's made out of this is a drawer, a wooden drawer, and galvanized piece of metal from the roof. But as a kid, as I grew up, my grandmother was at an age where she couldn't at night. I stayed with her. Got up and went to school the next day, and then went back to my home and did my chores. But I did that because she was not in good health. But on the way to my grandmother's, I had 25 cents, and I would go by the candy store, and I would buy 25 butterscotches. And now the galvanized was for those of you, and I think I'm probably the senior of the group of artists here. I was raised in a house, a wooden frame house with an outhouse, and we had the tin roof. And the best experience, the best way to go to sleep, is to have it rain on a tin roof. And now, but to top it off, the rain plus a butterscotch, unbelievable. So that's the story behind that piece. So when Adler saw that and the story, etc., we just hit it off and bingo. So I really appreciate him and his work, and not to mention Mr. Darius.
Of course.
Thank you.
Yeah, we spoke on the phone actually at first.
Yes.
And we spoke for a couple hours.
Yep.
And then I visited your studio, and by then it was like, okay, we're ready. And he shared the story, and it was like, yep, this will work.
Yeah.
Because it's a story so much about life remembered, but life remembered through a materiality. I mean, and
Right.
sweetness and sound. These are the kind of thing that actually makes place, or this is the kind of thing that in essence become the most valuable thing about a home, about any place that is important to you. It's on that level. And to have that at the sort of core of the exhibition, through the actual life of one of the artists, not necessarily a speculative fiction written by one of us. This is no, that was just very good and also inspiring, because at that point what George offered me is, it's not even something, it's not a narrative that is based in Sistrunk, which is even better, right? It's a narrative based northern central Florida, that it definitely drives home the point that Black diasporic life
right.
exists at a level that is grand and valuable to Black life. And we know it is part of the base for building home, neighborhoods, or people, I needed to get to that, or I was very excited to bring it to the exhibition. So at that point, my challenge was to create works that is in parallel to such,
Right.
to such richness.
Right. And I think to your point, yes, this exhibition is about Black life in Sistrunk, but like you said, this is something that can literally be translated in any Black space on the globe: Johannesburg, Miami, West Grove, Opelika. I mean, these are the sort of elements that you would find in almost any Black community on the planet.
I wanted to add one thing
yeah.
to this one point, is that I think coming here to trying to understand the neighborhood, one of the things that hit me first is the familiarity, right? It's like, yeah, it was pretty quickly I know where I was.
Right.
And that sense is like, it's very difficult to express, but you know when you're in a place that is familiar, that gives you license to be a little freer. And that was
And I think that's harkening back to the idea of home, right?
Right.
I guess just feels like home. And whether you are in the space here, or you are in the Bahamas, or you're, in Liberty City, these things feel familiar. And and you mentioned earlier the essence, right? I think that's a lot of it, is like the essence that exists. And though some of the structures from 100 years ago may not be there anymore, but the essence remains. And that is what makes it feel home, right? Like if I go to my great grandmother's house, she's not there anymore, but that her essence is still there. And I smell her, I feel her, that candy dish that's, it's still over there on, but maybe dusty, and she wouldn't have been dusty if she was here, but it's still there. So that those ideas and feelings of home and familiarity, I think, that are consistent throughout the diaspora, and are reflected in everything throughout this entire exhibit.
There's also something that was mentioned earlier about a group being together, and I had a flashback, if you will, to when I took cultural anthropology in college, and it reminded me of, in our community, in the alley, or wherever there was a group of folks together, there was a hierarchy. Okay, and there was also a discussion that somehow was substantive to them. And so it's how can I put it, that's something that I think today we kind of miss, and in some ways to be reminded that we should go back to that, coming together as a group of people, telling stories. And some of the stories were outlandish, but nonetheless, it was a form of communication. And at the same time, I believe in leading by example. So as our children grow up, they too need to understand the importance of being able to reflect back on stories that we tell, so that they too can keep those stories going, so that, again, our heritage and our history is not lost.
Sure.
Darius, I want to loop back around to your practice as a poet.
Mhm.
Poetry is such an impactful and such an important part of our culture, our global diasporic culture. Like, how is your poetry in this exhibition an extension of your greater work? I know that you wrote a book recently called "And the Walls Came Tumbling."
Yes.
How does your work here reflect beyond the space?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and thank you for mentioning the book. You go get that wherever y'all the camera is. Make sure y'all get that book. And the walls came tumbling. But certainly, I think the work in this exhibit, it was a great opportunity for me to bring some of my practice to this exhibit. And so in this exhibit is not only that poem, but shorter pieces that are throughout the exhibit, like the one that's right here on the floor where it says, "Sweet girl, keep tight your grip, the world is yours," and there are a few more of those that are throughout. And so for me as a writer, a curator of thoughts and ideas and words and putting stuff together, I think I'm always about being as truthful and as honest as possible and getting to the core of whatever the situation is, but also really exploring concepts of race, identity, concepts of joy as well. And I think the piece that's in this exhibit does a bit of all of that. And it's my charge, I think, as an artist, and we were speaking earlier about spirituality. And I think for me, my writing is a spiritual practice. It is meditation. It is prayer. It is all of that. It is praise. And so this work in this is that it is praise for the community. It is praise to the ancestors. It is a prayer to the ancestors. And that's what I kind of try to do, or not even try to do. That's kind of what I do in all of my work. That's kind of how that comes out and how that practice manifests itself. And I don't even know if I answered your question. I was just talking. I don't know.
No, you did.
Okay, cool.
I think you did. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd ask, how was this an extension of your
Oh,
poetic
so
practice?
yes, I'm on point. I'm on
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm on point. Yeah. So
Yes.
I mean, even like if I can just say, thinking of the walls came tumbling. The pieces in that book, it's a collection of a lot of pieces that explore that do those things, that praise icons in our community, one of which is my grandmother. For me, I recollect on that, and so it's a lot of semi-autobiographical and autobiographical work, but it is also a piece that is a microscope on a lot of the ills that exist in society. And so this piece here, again, it's like this microscope, but not on the ills, right? It's but on the pieces that feel like joy, on the pieces that maybe we may look at and not give as much credit as possible, but to make sure that we connect to the tree, the mount that used to be a tree. So that was a reference to like the churches and the because we have in Sistrunk there's like 15 churches on one block, so but and most of them have a mount, something as a name, right? But often before there was like a tree, like there used to be a tree, and that's where service was held at this tree. So to give honor and praise and shine on those aspects was super important for me.
Like I'm just thinking about the service on the mount when you think about the Bible.
Absolutely.
So I really enjoyed listening to all of you, because I actually had an opportunity to take a walk through the exhibition with Dominique just a couple weeks back. And it was my first time seeing the exhibition. And I was floored immediately, because I'm an architect, and my background is also in stage management. So everything just feels like a part of a home when you do walk into the space. And I think that Dominique and all of you have done an exceptional job at really capturing the essence of this community and really giving the patrons who do come to visit the exhibition an opportunity to really at least get a glimpse into what being and experiencing diasporic spaces are, the beautiful parts of being in a diasporic space. So I wanted to take this opportunity to open it up to our guests who are looking at us this evening to ask any questions of any of you. I'm wondering if there's any questions. They're typing, so folks are typing. So
All right, let's
I
get
think
it.
we will gather those questions, and I'll give you all an opportunity to sip some water,
All right.
so that we can answer the questions.
Great.
I mean, while we're taking a break, if I do want to just give honor and praise to Dominique Dennis for
Absolutely.
her work on the show.
Mhm.
So and assembling this group of Avengers together
Mhm.
and making it happen. So
Yes.
shout out
Yes.
to the Queen Dominique.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Type your questions, send them to our team here, and we're going to take about maybe 1 or 2 minutes to gather those questions, and then we will return and ask Darius, Adler, and George the questions that you've posed to us. So you can go grab some water yourselves if you'd like. We'll be here. We'll be back with you in a couple seconds.
The moon is the same moon above you, aglow with its cool evening light. But shining at night in Tunisia, never does it shine so bright. The stars are aglow in the heavens, but only the wise understand that shining at night in Tunisia, they guide you through the desert sand. Words fail to tell a tale too exotic to be told. Each night's a deeper night in the world ages old. The cares of the day seem to vanish. The ending of day brings release. Each wonderful night in Tunisia, where the nights are filled with peace.
Thank you so much for staying with us. We have about 3 questions to ask our panelists this afternoon. The first question being, what is the future of Sistrunk given the development of downtown Fort Lauderdale? And I invite any of you to jump in and answer that heavy question.
That's a heavy question.
Yeah.
do they want a positive spin to the question, or what may seem dystopian?
I think
so-
it's open.
Yeah, so I think unfortunately we've seen across the country and I'll probably say the world, right? As these developments occur, these developments happen and pop up at an alarming rate, that the community in which they're being, built upon, I mean, they're literally building upon the community, and so you see it, the encroachment that's ever so. At first, it was ever so slowly, but now this me looking at what's happening around this area, around the Sistrunk area, it's happening ever so quickly, and I think a prime example is the Sistrunk marketplace that exists on Sistrunk, right east of Andrews Avenue and on Sistrunk. It's a beautiful food hall and brewery. It's amazing. It's so beautiful there. Like, it's a beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful. A lot of great dining options and things that are in there, and it's on the west side of the railroad tracks that, and we understand what those mean in most communities. However, that ain't built for anybody that's in the Sistrunk community. That's not who it's for. That it's built there to be a beacon to others to come and fill up all these high rises that they're building around the community. So what does that do? And how does that impact everything else that's even more west of that food hall? So there are things that in places that seem to be going to be consistent for a while. The YMCA is building a new YMCA on Sistrunk that is going to have a black box theater that is in the space of some historic sites. But personally, I fear for the future of a Sistrunk. I think it is. I think George mentioned when we were off camera that it's important that we are telling these stories and documenting what's happening right now, because in 30 years, what is it going to look like? And I don't know.
You want to answer, George?
Yes. I will sort of segue from what Darius mentioned. Gentrification is inevitable in communities as developers come in and see opportunities to build, and individuals that look like us, unfortunately, if they don't have the wherewithal, they are pushed out. So what is important, I think, is one of my favorite sayings is quotes is, art is proof that anything has ever happened in the past. So the responsibility is on us as artists, when and where we can, to create art in our communities that hopefully will remain and be permanent, so that it indeed says what happened in our communities in the event that the gentrification and the development does take place. At the same time, there are individuals and organizations that look to preserve some history that is happening here in Sistrunk. And Darius mentioned, the YMCA, the leadership there had the forethought, and continues to commit to, as best as they can, look for ways to incorporate the history of Fort Lauderdale, Black Fort Lauderdale. And of course, 100 years of Black Fort Lauderdale is hard to capture, but in essence, an effort is made in that area. But I think the key thing is our being able to, where we can, be a part of the history making and preserving and the storytelling through whatever art forms we have, so that when the development takes place and the gentrification takes place, there still will be something here in our community that people still can say, okay, the history is not lost. It's a fact that we've lived with for years.
Yeah. I mean, if I can, so I think one idea, you use the word inevitability, and I think that's a tough thing, a tough pill to swallow, right? To say that it's inevitable, right? But I do think there are opportunities for it not to be inevitable, but that comes in the form of legislation.
Absolutely.
That comes in the form of wealth gathering and purchasing land, like having the capital to, buy the land before, and not sell it to these developers who have no real care about the community. And so I think it's, and all of that is education. So the more you learn about the community and know about the community that you're in, and so as you grow and you're older and you're able to procure certain funds and things, and then that is more likely that you will put the work in to make sure that these things don't just happen and that you are just erased. And so I guess I'm fearful, but I like to think about how do we fight against the inevitable? How do we do that?
I think you already answered that question when you mentioned the essence of your grandmother's house. I mean, in essence, I'm going to make an argument for the immaterial that's in Sistrunk, and that's the only solution for encroaching developers. It's everything that you've said. Everything that you said is actually immaterial. Legislation is immaterial. Gathering money is immaterial. Telling stories is immaterial. Art is immaterial. Even the institutions like a library, it's embodied in a building, but it's not really about the building. The same is true for museums and art, individual art practices. I don't think any development can actually destroy the immaterial part of Sistrunk, or for that matter, West Grove, or anywhere Black people live. And so I think that's tend to be the problem in the core of the question. I mean, the idea of encroachment is a physical one, but what has been encroached upon is not all physical.
Right.
So I think there's a good chance, may not be inevitable, there's a good chance that the encroachment can be near total, but that doesn't negate what you said earlier, that the footprint of your grandmother's house and the essence of it will still be there. Sure, it will be embodied within a giant tower. You'll need the imagination to find it. I don't think we're all comfortable with that.
So you're talking about, if I'm understanding you, an intangible versus a tangible.
No.
A visible versus a non.
Yes, but it's more fluid than that. The more fluid part, in essence, is we understand all of us are human, all of us have bodies, but we also understand the narrative contained within our individual bodies and our collective bodies have a very specific sort of leaning. That particular specific leaning, totally immaterial. It doesn't make us any difference than someone who's Chinese or French, but we like the specificity of that leaning. It's that I'm talking about. I'm talking about dirt. I'm talking about candy jars. I'm talking about trees that may still be there, flower bushes or signs and piece of concrete. These things will never go away, even if they're renamed after people that we don't know 100 years from now. It doesn't go away. Someone just like us, 100 years in the future, can revive what we've done here. And that, for me, makes Sistrunk, it's not as fragile as it purport to be. It is fragile in terms of capitalism. Sure. It's fragile in terms of real estate development, but at its core, no. So I think we should battle to save Sistrunk in different arenas. Then we can be strong. But in one arena, it's like it's indestructible. The arena where culture and the material reign, it will still be there. But my view is actually very romantic and idealized.
Yeah. It's an idealizing one.
And the reason
Yes.
is I'm not afraid to lose the material to save the immaterial. That's the deal I'm willing to make, right? And because I think their material is so much more precious than a $500, $1,000 home or $1 million condo. That is that's low.
But what's important is that, so if in your viewpoint,
And Darius, just because I know we're short on time, if you wouldn't mind yours being the last, because this is incredible. Your answers are incredibly interesting. But I just want to.
yeah, it was like
Note
30
that.
seconds.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. So cool. So in your and that viewpoint, right? It is the important part is preserving and honoring that immaterial that you speak of, right? So because if you lose this material, but at the same time aren't preserving that immaterial,
Total loss.
then it's a total loss.
Absolutely.
And
There's
if I may, and that's why I stressed earlier the importance of storytelling.
Sure, absolutely.
Yes.
You know,
I love all of these answers. I won't chime in because I have plenty of ideas about this, but I know we're short on time. Do we have time for one more? Okay. So why is the shotgun house called a shotgun house?
well,
Georgia,
I can tell you from experience.
Yes.
You know, we were raised in a shotgun house, and imagine a wooden frame house that you open the front door, and when you open the front door, you can see directly to the back door. And if you had a shotgun and you shot the shotgun, it would not hit any walls. It would go from the front door to the back, out the back door. So that's why it's called the shotgun house.
Very simple answer. no, there's no in betweens.
Yeah, you
That's
know,
where the name
there's
comes from.
yeah.
And then there was one more question about a rhythm. The poser of the question said that when she walked into the space, she noticed that there was a rhythm to how the pieces were organized, how the work is in conversation with each other, the cadence of the work. Did any of you think about rhythm when creating the works that you did create for this exhibition?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So how so?
Well, my work is already on these partitions that are very specific in size, and there's 12 of them. And they also bracket one side of the exhibition. So in order to actually make a work that can hold that, a sense of rhythm had to be developed. So I came before to make it specifically for this. But internally, the work itself is about a kind of seeing and repetition that is scaled to that of a body. So that's within my work. I think the other thing that's happening within the exhibition is that between the curator and exhibition designer, Jermaine, they did an excellent job.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
that's kind of, I mean, yeah, I'll speak to mine just as a poet, you know, rhythm is embedded in that. But it was a continuous rhythm between past and present and future, and the rhythm between this space and other spaces, you know, across the world. So that rhythm was present, you know, in the writing. And I used to be a rapper, you know, so I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to, you know, flow a little bit in this thing, you know. So, but I do think, like Adler mentioned, the rhythm of the entire exhibit is a testament to Dominique and Jermaine's, you know, brilliance and their collaboration to make everything connect and flow and bounce.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, Dominic and Jermaine are both architects. They come from an architectural background,
Like yourself.
like myself.
Hey.
So that was actually the first thing I noticed when walking through the space. It's almost as though Jermaine and Dominic created the alleyway for you,
Mm. Mhm.
Adler. And I didn't really get that until Dominic walked me through the space and told me that your work was about the alleyway. And I was like, look, this is the alleyway right here that the actual exhibition placement of the works creates. And it just became very clear that this space is actually the home, and the actual floor plan of a shotgun house is right here in the center of the space. It Rhythm is coursing throughout the whole entire exhibition. Um, so I'm sad to see this portion of our programming tonight come to a conclusion. It was such a pleasure speaking with all of you. I have a great knowledge of Darius and Adler's work. I've had the pleasure of working with you on several occasions in the past, and I've had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Gadson tonight for the first time. So I hope you all enjoyed the first segment of tonight's programming. We're going to take a small intermission, and we're then going to pick up with David Moore, Jermaine Barnes, and Adrian Chadwick after the break. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for staying with us this afternoon. We are going into our second portion of the programming today. I'm going to start by introducing one of the key person for organizing this exhibition. Her name is Miss Dominique Dennis. She's the curator of the Porch is the Porch is
The tree
the
is
porch
the
is the tree
watering
is the
hole.
watering hole. Sorry, the title
I
title
know.
just left me.
Yeah.
So Dominic is trained as an architect with more than 2 decades of combined experience in architecture, urban planning, and public art curating. She has worked on several firms in the New York metropolitan area and South Florida. For the past 6 years, her experience working for the Broward Cultural Division with artists, architects, and other design professionals has introduced her to the world of cross-disciplinary collaboration. And then we also have, as a part of this panel, Miss Adrienne Chadwick. Adrienne is a visual artist who utilizes accumulation, repetition, and translucence to express ideas related to power and resistance in society and nature. She has worked as a museum administrator since 1994, earned a Bachelor of Fine Arts from the New World School of the Arts and a Master of Public Administration from Nova Southeastern University. Her work has been exhibited at Aqua Art Fair in Miami, Diaspora Vibe Cultural Arts Incubator in Miami, and Girls Club Collection in Fort Lauderdale. So to kick off this segment, I will ask you, Dominic, an important question, as you are the curator of the exhibition. What was the impetus for your conceptualization of this exhibition, and how did you choose a group of artists that are a part of it?
I started working on this exhibition in the summer of 2019. At the time, I was working on a couple of projects in the Sistrunk area. And one particular project was dealing with concept of the link between West African culture and the African diaspora. And there was so many research and community engagement done during this project that I got to really know the community. And there were talks about having an exhibition about this particular project, but having seen the people of Sistrunk, and I have to mention that during my exploration of the neighborhood for this project, I got to realize there are so many similarities between Sistrunk and Haiti, for example. And I don't know if, well, you must know that I was born and raised in Haiti. And those similarities, especially in the way people gather all over the neighborhood, reminded me so much of Haiti that I wanted to explore this. And I also, instead of having an exhibition about one sculpture, I wanted to showcase the community because I thought that would have been something that was more powerful, you know. So, the first thing to do was to come up with a concept, of course, and selling the idea to the director was one of our major milestones because we really needed Phil Dunlap to actually approve a budget for the project. And thank God he liked the idea and said yes. So we should really thank him because that was the first major milestone to get this done. So thank you, Phil. and then it was about time to put the team together. I have to say that working on that project, dealing not the exhibition, but working on those projects in the Sistrunk area was probably the first time I felt like my own personal interests merge with what I'm doing at work. So I wanted to tap into both sides of myself, you know. The architectural designer / researcher would like to explore Black communities and communities that are at the margin of society in a way, and also Dominic, the public art and design project manager. So those two sides of me came together, and I tapped into two groups of artists. The local artists who actually I learned to appreciate because they work on previous project with the cultural division, and other people that I actually have seen the work from a distance sometimes. Some of them I didn't know personally, but I followed their career and I knew they could come together and do some wonderful work together. I have to say the local artists, as you met them, were David, Darius, and George Gadson, and later on Adrian. Adrian has not worked with us, but I was familiar with her work, especially the small houses that the series that she's been doing. And when I approached her, deep down inside, I wanted her to say, yes, I think the small houses. So I waited until she answers, and thank God she wanted those series dealing with redlining to be part of the exhibition. And I tap into, as I mentioned, the other people that I was not too familiar with.
that I didn't know personally, but like Jermaine, for example, I had somewhat met Jermaine like 5 years ago. And I think at the time he was on a panel at Design Miami. And I wanted to, I learned about the work that he's been doing for Paloka. So I knew that the concept I had for the exhibition, concept that is centered around the gathering space and the back alley, I knew that he was somebody based on his previous work that could actually create something that would be central to the exhibition. And thank God when I approached him, he said yes. And the funny thing was, after our conversation about the project, when we met, we saw the space, and he said, "This is going to be a great exhibition." I'm thinking I should be the one convincing him, but he's already all excited
Convincing you.
about it.
Yeah.
And so that was really a good connection. And when we talk about Adler, I've seen Adler's work at the PAM Museum in Miami. And I liked it because I always say that Adler think it could have been a good urban planner, the way he thinks, the way he analyzes cities. And I knew we needed something like that for this exhibition. I wanted to bring different artists with different background because I felt like the exhibition needed to be experienced emotionally and also spatially. I think two people that were not here that I also want to mention are Marlene Bruno. I knew her. She's part of my personal network. I knew her because we went to grad school together. She's an urban planner, and I knew she could actually create an interesting map for us, something that is that it doesn't look like a GIS map, even though she's an urban planner. And also Lake. Lake was at the time working on a project for Port Everglades. And during the selection process, I went to his website and I saw his sculptures and I was like, wow. One of them in particular, I mean, those two sculptures that are here, I really like them. And thank God, lucky me, when I asked him, he had two left.
Yes.
So he was nice enough to bring, to send us those two sculptures. So I think putting this team together was so important because people had to work in a collaborative manner. And I wanted to make sure that nobody had a big ego. They could all work together. And this was really a wonderful experience. And this, I have to mention that this was happening last year, 2020, during COVID. And it was, we do the kickoff meeting, and then we had to wait for another 3 months until we can go out there because a lot of the work was to first explore the neighborhood before you can actually produce the art. So it was really a wonderful experience, and we really got to meet the people of Sistrunk, and some of them opened their homes, and you can look at David's picture and you see how welcoming. I know he's going to talk about it, so I don't want to talk too much about that, but that was a really wonderful experience to actually get to meet the people of Sistrunk.
No, I think the collaborative nature of the exhibition is sort of an extension of what architectural practice is, and you're an architect. The architects have to work together to create these.
Yes, exactly. In a way, it's like managing the project as you will manage the construction of a building or something like that.
Absolutely.
Everybody has something very special that they bring to the team, and it's all telling one story. It's at the beginning you actually have a concept, you have a narrative, and I had some visual. I think I had a PowerPoint that I sent to everybody about what I was thinking in terms of the flow of the exhibition. And when Jermaine introduced the shotgun home, that really gave the exhibition a more spatial feel. Like, when you enter the space through the alleyway and you enter the shotgun home, then it's a process and you feel like you're really immersed into the experience. And that's why all the pieces are talking to each other in many ways. And I think having the right team was the best recipe for success. That's why everything seems to be connected
Yes,
to each other.
absolutely.
You know, big big thank you to all the artists who actually worked through some of the most difficult time, and nobody gave up. Nobody said, "Oh, this is too much," and they were all in it 100%. And this is a privilege.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah.
And I mean, my understanding is that, many of the artists who are participating in this exhibition have also done great work outside of this exhibition
Exactly.
during the pandemic as well.
Yes,
So I
exactly.
think people found the motivation to keep on going and continue, or maybe it was an opportunity for a lot of artists to do.
Some of them were busy, some of them were not, and they thought that was a great opportunity to actually do something interesting, different, and to explore a different neighborhood, something different, and I think because there was a narrative that went through the entire exhibition, it was interesting to most of the artists. Obviously, not everybody that I talked to when I was putting the team together was approved for the project, because I wanted to make sure that the team was right. And this was the right team.
That's the right team.
Yeah, the bar is really high when it comes to me doing something else with other people.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we had any problems throughout the process, and that was amazing.
And that's a blessing.
Yeah, that's a blessing. I've heard horror stories, but this was really good collaboration.
Yeah. And then speaking of having a good team, you have Adrian. To your right. Adrian, I wanted to ask you about your piece, Settlement. It addresses hard realities, similar to a question that was asked in the previous segment, about that many diasporic communities, including Sistrunk, face, like housing inequality, economic and climate gentrification, policy-driven disenfranchisement, redlining, etc. Tell me how your piece addresses some of those hard realities, and how you wanted people to receive and the message in your work.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, Resettlement is a piece that's made out of hundreds of handmade clay houses, black earthenware clay that has been high fired in a kiln. And it also includes red thread of varying weights that are twisted around the houses. The houses are all in straight lines, rows. And this piece was a new piece for me because I've created the houses before, the installations with houses, but I've never included another material. So this time including this red thread was a way to symbolically really push forward the idea of redlining. And resettlement is a kind of displacement that happened, and I had been doing research on redlining in Miami and in Fort Lauderdale. I found a lot of maps in Miami, and resettlement happened because the powers that be chose a specific neighborhood to be a specific neighborhood. So maybe it was a neighborhood of working class people originally, and the politicians or the powers that be decided that that's a neighborhood that they didn't want to be that. They shuffle around using policies and using maps and using kind of just planning and nudging buyers and developers to develop in different places. And so that kind of reminded me of maybe what has happened to Sistrunk and to many neighborhoods across the nation and across this nation, and maybe even globally. Yeah.
There is a book that I read a couple years ago called The Color of Law. And it was basically an explanation of redlining and how it has basically, and how policy was the driver of a lot of the displacement and just systemic disenfranchisement of minorities in the country. And each chapter basically either highlighted very specific communities, and they were always Black communities. Things like highways being built through communities,
zoning, and loans. The way loans are given, predatory loan activities,
which is what happened in 2008. 2008 was like this bubble because people were literally giving loans to people who may not have been able to manage large loans like that. And so like, I think that, your piece, it's an extension of work that you were doing previously as well. But what I love about the quality of your pieces is that you have homes, like you mentioned earlier when we were speaking, homes that were handcrafted, as you call them. But then as you continued practicing the work, the quality of the pieces became more manufactured. And so can you speak to that quality and how that may in some ways bolster the narrative of your piece?
Sure. When I began making this project, these houses, not originally, but for this show, I went through the process of thinking about making a mold for the house. So I went to a specialist, to a ceramicist, and learned how to make a mold because I was going to make these houses out of molds. And then the more that I thought about it, I wanted that handmade quality, and I wanted to talk about labor and building, because that's working class people, or people that are in the Sistrunk neighborhood, and each house is different. And I wanted to celebrate the differences, because oftentimes in new developments, houses are cookie cutter style houses that are kind of the same design repeated over and over again. And so, growing up in South Florida, both in Miami and Broward County, it was always preferred to live in one of these fancy new neighborhoods. And around the time of Hurricane Andrew, my parents bought an old 1960s home, Florida home, concrete block home, and our friends' families bought homes along Flamingo, like 27th Avenue. And after Hurricane Andrew, all these fancy, beautiful homes weren't to hurricane code, and they're gone. They were gone.
Yeah.
And so and also being from Central America and the Caribbean, I always have had this love of the uniqueness of homes, and having homes painted different colors, and gardens that have grown over the years, and just the character that are found in old homes. And so I wanted to kind of symbolize that by having each house being handmade, and therefore they're all slightly different.
No, it's beautiful. And how do you, because we were also talking about your interest in breaking free from the narrative, this specific narrative of you. So how do you envision your practice evolving from this exhibition?
Well, this opportunity was kind of a turning point, I suppose, for this particular series, because I was telling you before we went on air that previously I had made these houses quite a while ago, and I kept on receiving requests to show the houses again. And I'm a full-time arts administrator and a full-time artist, and don't necessarily have a whole lot of time in the studio all the time. And so Dominique asked me to show the houses, or she was, she says that she didn't say specifically, but I don't know.
Did I?
I don't know. I don't remember, but it just, maybe she didn't.
Maybe a hint.
Maybe she didn't, but this show is definitely, like, of all my work, that work is connected to this show. And so I I put my foot down to myself
Mhm.
and I told myself, I'm never going to show the previous series again.
Uh-huh.
And every time that somebody wants me to show, to do something with my houses, I'm going to make a whole new piece.
Mhm.
So even since this show, other people have asked me to show these houses, and I've since then made new houses. I've added white porcelain to signify the contrast between cultures or races
Mhm.
in gentrification. So
Mhm.
it was a good. Dominique did a great job of inspiring me to, you know,
I
just
like.
move my practice. You know,
Oh, that's great. But I also like the fact that when you first presented them, they didn't have the right line.
they did.
And I told you, you have time. You could add the right
I told
red
you about this
lines.
idea, and then
Yeah, and she was like,
and then you were like, no, do it now for this show.
for this show, if you're going to do something new, I wanted it to be for this show.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted it to be special. So that's great.
And actually, something just came to mind now that because I'm looking at the pieces from, like, they're right behind you, and was it? I'm noticing that the actual red lines that are made of the thread, they're falling off the side of the pedestal. Was it a specific choice for you to allow it to just drape over? Because you could have stopped. You could have stopped it. Yeah.
You know, I knew I was going to use the thread. I didn't plan it out in advance. Typically, when I'm going to do an installation, I plan it out and I set it all out. But I didn't do that this time. I came intuitively to the space. I don't think I even knew that there were going to be two pedestals.
Okay.
And so there are two pedestals, and I just kind of went with the flow and placed all the houses. It changed a lot. It was kind of just, you know, go with the flow. And then it was just an intuitive decision to put the thread down. And as I was placing it and playing with it, I realized that, oh, this thread can be a connector between two pedestals and connect these two pedestals. And then that's how I started to decide to have it hang off the edge. And like I told you off the air, the red lines are not specific red lines of Sistrunk. They're symbolic to represent the idea of redlining. It's like an abstract kind of
An abstraction.
narrative
Yes.
there. Yeah.
Makes sense. So what I want to do now, that we've had an opportunity to speak with both of you about your contributions to this exhibition, I'd like to open it up to our audience to ask questions of Dominic and Adrian. And if our team here has any questions for me, I can go ahead. If you just give us 1 second to gather the questions for you all.
In the meantime, I would like to thank a couple of people. I don't know
Sure.
if you mind. For anybody who would like to do an exhibition like this, especially when you are introducing yourself, you're not from a community and you're going to do research about the community, it is always good to have a community liaison to actually be the person to introduce you, because it's good practice. And for that reason, I would like to thank Grace Cool. She's our community engagement director from the Cultural Division. I want to thank her because she was our community liaison. She's been working in Sistrunk for years, and she was, especially at the beginning, she introduced us to all the trailblazers, the people who actually can say, okay, it's okay for you to be walking around here and ask questions and take pictures. You know, you kind of want somebody to do that for you. And a special thank you also to Dennis Harrison. She had been working in the community for years. And the historical wall that you see in the back with all those historical pictures, it's one of the favorites from the people in Sistrunk. They always come to it. We could not have that wall without her, because she went and knocked on doors to get us those pictures. So special thank you to Dennis Harrison. And last but not least, a special thank you to Luke Jenkins, who was our installer. He was not only our installer, he's also a local artist. So he was a problem solving guy, during the installation. And I learned a lesson from that. Always bring the installer during the design process, because the installer can tell the artist, maybe that's not a good idea. Why don't you do this or that to install the piece? Don't wait until the end to actually come, introduce the installer to the work that's being installed. And I know I'm looking at Leslie Fordham, who's here. I want to say thank you for just, working on this project. I have a full load of work also. So she kind of looked the other way when I was disappearing from the office. So thank you for that. But this was a very special project, and I felt like, it will help us make good connections with the community for the future, for the other public art project we'll have in the future.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, I have the questions for you all now. So I'm going to start with a question to you, Dominic. Did you know what artist mediums you wanted in this exhibition? Did you know beforehand?
I know the work from the Dillard High School students will be there. I know about the photography. I wanted David to explore the neighborhood and have a series of pictures. I knew that the pictures will be about the gathering place where people gather in the neighborhood. So I know about that. I didn't know what Adler was going to do. All the artists that are along the gathering space, I think pretty much I knew what I wanted. The biggest surprise was the chairs, because we designed we were thinking about the gathering space, and I gave Germaine total freedom to come up with a concept. And we had the first concept, but because of COVID, we could not do it. And then he introduced the chair. That was a very nice surprise. But those chairs everybody wants one. So that was a good that was a good thing. Those are famous chairs.
Yes.
So some of it I knew. I know different elements that I wanted, and I know what medium they will be in. But as I mentioned, the biggest surprise are the chairs.
Yes. Wonderful. And Adrian, are there any particular examples of redlining that inspired your piece, Resettlements?
Yeah, I looked at maps. If anybody follows me on Instagram, I had been posting some of these maps. I mostly found digitized versions of Miami maps, but all around the nation, every big city in the nation. If you Google search, redline maps from the 1950s, what I realized as I did my research is that if you have to say Negro communities, not Black communities, because of the time period and the language that was used at the time period. So that kind of, changed the way that I was searching. And so from the 1920s, 1930s, there are maps that have been digitized. And since then, my sister, who lives in Sistrunk with her two boys, and works at the History Fort Lauderdale and the Fort Lauderdale archives, she has since found for me after the show redlining maps of Fort Lauderdale, but they just haven't been digitized yet. So we have kind of more tricks up our sleeve to maybe write a white paper and maybe do some more work together going forward.
That's amazing. Oh, wow. I'm looking forward to seeing the output post research. And then you mentioned that you were posting the research that you were doing on your Instagram. So can you tell us what your Instagram handle is? So
Adrian Chadwick.
So it's just Adrian Chadwick. So at Adrian Chadwick. And then one last question for Dominique. Is there a possibility that this could be a permanent installation?
Permanent. That's something I didn't think about. You mean being part of a permanent collection somewhere?
They use the word installation. So,
Installation.
Yeah.
That's something we'll we'll have to think about.
Yeah.
Yep.
If anybody has a location, put it
Yeah.
into the chat
yeah.
box.
Put it in the chat box.
If you are from an institution and you are watching and you're interested in having the exhibition, just contact the Cultural Division and we can talk. But that will be interesting. Originally, we wanted the exhibition to travel, but a lot of people, things are booked for years
Years
at
in
a
advance,
time.
yeah.
Yes. So it's very difficult, but we open. Especially the exhibition will be on view until May the 29th. So that's, we have a few weeks to talk about it and come up with some ideas. Because when I come here and I look at it, I feel a little bit sad that it's going to go away. But unless we find another space for it, the right space for it, then that will be it.
So you heard it from Dominic. If you have any, and Adrian, if you have any hopeful spaces, any venues that would be great for this exhibition, contact the division, the Broward Division of Cultural Affairs.
Yeah.
And if there is no more questions, we're going to wrap up the second segment of tonight's programming. We are going to have our final two panelists in just about 2 minutes. And they're joining us virtually from Jamaica and Chicago. And that's Jermaine Barnes and David Muir.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to our third and final segment of today's programming regarding the exhibition. The porch is the tree is the porch is the tree is the watering hole. And in our final segment of today's conversation, we're going to be speaking with Jermaine Barnes, and David Moore. I'm going to begin by introducing you to today's panelists. So let's start with Jermaine Barnes. Jermaine Barnes' research and design practice investigates the connection between architecture and identity. Mining architecture's social and political agency, he examines how the built environment influenced Black domesticity. His design and research contributions have been published and exhibited internationally at venues and in publications, including the Museum of Modern Art, the Graham Foundation, the New York Times, Architect Magazine, Design Miami Art Basel, the Swiss Institute, Metropolis Magazine, Curbed, and the National Museum of African American History, where he was identified as one of the future designers on the rise. Secondly, we have Mr. David Moore. David Moore's love for candid cultural and lifestyle photography inspires his works and is a signature component of his photo art collections. His work explores the authenticity in people and relationships between cultural and class identities within the context and entities within the context of his own experiences. So, Jermaine, we're going to start our conversation with you. I want to begin the conversation with the same question I asked our first panel a little bit earlier, and I'm not sure that you were listening. Pose the question again.
I've been here the whole time.
You've been here the whole time. Okay, so
Yeah,
so
I don't remember the question, but I've been here the whole time.
But so let's ask the question again then. So the question is, the porch is a tree, is the watering hole, is an excavation of cultural and geographic notes that come together to draw the Sistrunk community. Tell us how your chosen medium, which is design architecture, speaks to the narrative to the narrative of the Sistrunk community and more broadly diaspora communities across the country and globally.
Gotcha. So for me and the way that I approached Dominique's proposal was trying to find ways in which Blackness finds itself across the diaspora and across communities. And so that materialized as sort of the built environment. So the ways we occupy porches, the ways we occupy informal porches, the ways we occupy housing. And so I wanted to bring a lot of those elements of wood frame construction, of metal roofs, of the singular shotgun home, of the porch, of these public spheres into the interior, which became the impetus for the exhibition design. So I always saw it as a way to show the commonalities across our culture from the various locations that we hail from, but also singing the praises of Sistrunk in that exploration.
Fantastic. And I wanted to also ask you, because you've been quite busy catching up all the awards that are even possible to get in the architecture space. You've received two very important ones recently. So I wanted to ask you, you are a recipient of not one but two coveted prizes in architecture: the 2021 Rome Prize and the 2021 Wheelwright Prize. The Porch, which you just mentioned, is an architectural element that can be found in historically diasporic housing typologies, including the shotgun house, is central to your ongoing research about Blackness in architecture. Can you tell us how the chair, which you have several chairs in the exhibition, which are titled Uneasy Lies, the Head That Wears a Crown, tell us about the significance of the chair in the context of the coveted porch, which you just explored through your research, and also what motivated your design choices as you envisaged the chairs.
Sure. So as Dominique mentioned earlier, the chairs were a happy accident because it was supposed to be a much larger collective item, but then COVID made it so that we couldn't sit within 6 feet of each other. So the only thing that had facilitated that was individual chairs. And my earlier porch research dealt with the large staircases. So Dominique originally approached me about commissioning another large staircase that everyone could sit on. And so one of the sort of forgotten objects immediately tied to the porch is the porch chair. Like you can't have a porch without the porch chair, right? So took some of the earlier sort of forms of the Bahamian porch chair, which is very iconic in the way that it looks. It's angular proportions, it's elevated back, and then thought about the ways in which Black people's hair we celebrate. It's our superpower. And unfortunately, a lot of other communities try to strip us of that superpower and they try to police our hair. So the reason why it's titled "Heavy is the Head That Wears the Crown" is because it's about all the responsibility that goes with our own shoulders of having to police our hair, be proud of our hair. And so it pays homage to Junkanoo bands and to Sunday morning church hats and the crowns in which we in the diaspora love to walk around and wear, as well as the Afro pick, which is one of the most iconic features of the Black community. So these two awards I recently got within the last 3 weeks are literally because of this exhibition. Those chairs were the focal point of those portfolios. And as you can see, once I was awarded, those chairs are the first thing they all publicize. So I thank Broward County Cultural Division. I thank Dominique, and I thank David, who I collaborated with from day one, talking about all this work, because that's where the idea came from to even put these things together. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank my amazing assistants who also helped pull this off, because it was a massive endeavor and it was a very long process, but Dominique pulled it off.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's, I mentioned earlier during the conversation that I had the opportunity to come and see the show maybe about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I was just completely floored by it. It's such a spiritual exhibition, and I knew what all the references were as soon as I saw everything. So I was really happy that you all did such an impressive job at making the community feel welcome with this exhibition, and then your contribution to architecture. You're a Black architect, which, as we know, that's like unicorn status. There's not very many of us. If any of you who are watching knows anything about the architectural profession, it's only 0.01% of the profession has Black architects in it, and Jermaine is one of them. Jermaine is an award recipient within that field, so that's incredibly impressive. Thank you so much for your thoughtful answers. And David,
yes,
I wanted to ask you about your photographic essays, your collection of photographs for the exhibition. This exhibition conjures the idea of gathering spaces a lot, and your work is a testament to that. I see that you were able to connect with the Sistrunk community in poignant ways, like you were literally in people's backyards on Sundays, it looks like, or whichever day of the week. So can you tell us a little bit about the permission that was given to you by the community to capture them in what seems to be very intimate moments, and what that experience was like?
Absolutely. So it's a regular part of my work to really be in people's faces in this particular way. When I did Pieces of Jamaica, which was a collection that took me a number of years to put together, that was a training ground for this type of intimacy in photography within a community. But I think what happened last year in documenting Sistrunk was particularly unique, because sure, you talk about permission, and you know, the cultural division was very helpful. They printed a set of cards that we could take around, and you know, when people were dubious about what our work was and why we were documenting, we actually had information printed from the cultural division explaining what the project was about, and it certainly alleviated fears of some folks. But because I had experience doing this work numerous times before, it was also really about letting people understand how much we're all the same, you know. So when you talk about the permission, I mean, we're in the midst of COVID. We've already been through the first 3 months of fear and death and all of these things happening, and you know, we're supposed to be this socially distanced, we're supposed to be masked, which of course doesn't help for telling stories with photography. If everyone is wearing a mask, we can't see their faces, we can't see their expressions, we can't tell a lot of the things that are going on. And because it's not movies and we're doing still photography, about even the body language and the things that are going on. So to answer you specifically with regard to what happened, even like scenes of people playing Lude or dominoes or cards and these different things and hanging out in the corner, it's so interesting that you're sharing these images all at the time that we're speaking about it. But I think the main reason why they were willing is that we're telling their stories. I mean, again, it's been said over and over, this whole theme of storytelling. In our business, or certainly in my business, we work on storytelling excellence every single day. And part of that excellence comes from connection. And so it's about being open and being someone who can communicate with everyone, who can not be thrown off by people who are unwilling at first, and really having the patience to work with each of the individuals we encountered to make them understand the importance of their participation in this project by just being themselves, because all we were doing is documenting everyday life. We weren't asking for anyone to do anything that didn't fit what they just would normally be doing. And it was really a great experience, but it's a continuation for me of other works that sort of, I've done this before.
Right, of course, because I understand you had a touring exhibition of your work specifically focused on, I believe it was the Jamaican diaspora.
Yeah, we've done a few of them actually. Most recently, and it's funny that Jermaine just received an award. I also just received notice that I was for my series of photographs in Cuba in the summer of 2019. We just got notified that it is going to win an award in July. I don't know what is the actual award yet, but we were just informed that it has been awarded, and that's a different culture. So my photography in Jamaica has done very well and has been lauded in many ways. But then my Cuban work just literally a few days ago received notification of it. That work also coming to the fore, and of course our work in Sistrunk. And Sistrunk is special to me because I work in Sistrunk all the time. I have lived in and around Sistrunk, not necessarily on Sistrunk Boulevard, but I've been in Sailboat Bend, I've been at Artist Lofts, and it's really next door. And I've worked, with the Urban League for over a decade. I've worked at African American Research Library for over a decade. And so all of these experiences make it natural that this is my community. I feel at home in this community.
Right. And I believe it's in the Sistrunk community that I met you several years ago.
Absolutely. Yeah, like I said, I'm there all the time. So,
yeah, you're there all the time. So congratulations to you and all of your success as well. I'm talking to two rock stars, apparently. And I wanted to take some time very briefly to ask the community if you have any questions of these two fantastic gentlemen we're speaking to this evening. If you have questions, you can post them you can just go ahead and post them in the chat, and I will receive them and pose them to our guests.
I would also love to mention while we're waiting for the questions. Okay. It was great that Dominique knew that she wanted, photography of the community and how they gathered. Mm-hmm. And, we had ideas beforehand of what we would get. People on their porches, people, gathering under trees, which was normal in the neighborhood. But there were a lot of things we did not expect. And it was just wonderful to just go through the process of being with the people. And again, some people vehemently did not want to be documented because their own personal reasons. But the ones who embraced it and were happy and proud to be in the community, to show their connection to their community, there's so many images which didn't make it in because the show is so small and we had so much work. But people playing chess on the corner. I mean, that didn't make it in, but it's so unique and so beautiful to see just that intellectual prowess on display in a Black community that you don't expect. There's so many different things at the barbershop, and there's so many bits that didn't get in because the show is so small in context of the community.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that this exhibition and other exhibitions like it, like Jermaine, I had the opportunity to see your show in New York this past week. I think it's so important to see Blackness being represented and shared in an internet intellectual format, and that the experiences of Black people, whether formal or informal, are so important to culture overall. It's not just Blackness within an insular context, but like the global conversation impacted deeply by Blackness. So Dominic was spot on bringing you all together to pontificate, to have fun, to kind of play, and think about us on a deeper level. So
she nailed it. What's up?
Yeah,
What's your question?
she nailed it.
She nailed it.
Oh, so the question is for David. David, you have a favorite photo subject from the series? A favorite story you were told by any of the community members?
Wow. You know what? I don't think I necessarily would have anything I would consider a favorite. There are many great things that happened. For example, just hearing George explain shotgun houses in the first segment, I'd say that one of the things that was a favorite moment for me was actually being in some of those shotgun houses and taking pictures and then seeing the modifications. Like, sure, it originally was one room or one, entrance and exit all in one building, but then people extend and they add a kitchen on the back, and then some people, cut a hole in the side and put a bedroom on the outside. So to see the different variations of it's, I like to consider it ingenuity, what people are able to do with the limited resources and to create new things. It's just incredible. And I love to see that in our minority communities where resources are low and ingenuity is high. And it's just beautiful. So my personal favorite story, but you know what? I think the fact that it was COVID and that things changed so much, there were no gatherings at churches, for example, which was, the plan going in was to get all the churches, but no one gathered in churches because they weren't allowed to. So many things changed. The expectations didn't meet the actuality, but we still found that people gathered no matter what. And under the trees was always special. Like, there's no question. The trees, you can't get the folks to go into the sun when there's great shade.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. And then for you, Jermaine, we got another question from our audience. What was the process you went through to design and build your chairs?
So we went through about, I'm not going to lie with you, about 30 different iterations of the chairs.
Nice.
Me and the team. A lot of that was testing. It was, we had 4 different versions of the backs. Right, so we started with the Bahamian chair. We deconstructed that into the same dimensions. Instead of having it be wooden, we made it metal to reference the metal roofs of the shotgun home. And then I had early thoughts of a weaving for the seating, and we found this amazing seamstress named Paola Aguirre out of Coconut Grove, who we approached and was like, "Hey, we'd love for you to do these weavings based off of hair braiding," and she did that process. So boom, knocked those out. And every single chair has its own specific weaving that again references these stories of hair and policing, etc. And then the toughest part was once we figured out that the hair pick would be the bottom half, creating distinctly different crowns for each of the hair picks was the difficult part. So we have about 30 different versions of those crowns that exist, but we just picked the 6 that we thought were the best for the show. That sort of had the biggest variety in scale and ornament, etc. And then we tried 4 different ways to deal with the back. So there were some that were painted, there were some that was stained, there was some that was set on fire to sort of make a different type of color palette. In the end, we found just the raw wood looked the best. And so we just kept it that way. And in the end, you have the raw wood, which references hair and the frame of the shotgun home. You have the metal that references the roof, and then you have the seat, which is the braided rope, which again references hair. So that's where all of that came together.
And how long would you say that iterative process took?
Oh, about 4 months. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Dominique was getting very annoyed with me. She said every time
Right.
she say, so we showed her the chairs early, and then she was like, "All right, do you have a prototype built yet?" We're like, "Not yet." "Do you have a prototype yet?" "Not yet." "Do you have a prototype
Yeah.
yet?" "Not yet." And a lot of that wasn't under my control. The fabricator was taking forever, and then they would fall out and come back. Cause I'm not a metalsmither, so like if it was all wood stuff, we could have built it. But she like the fabricator just kept delaying and kept delaying. I have to go back to Dominique and say, "Can we have another week? Can we have another week?
Yeah.
Can we have another week?" But by the time we
Yeah.
were done, she was blown away because they were supposed to be made to sit in. And then once Dominique saw them, she said, "Nobody's sitting in these."
Yeah.
Yeah, she's the one that made that decision.
And I have a final question about the chairs
What's
because
up?
I want one. How is it? Are the chairs just going to be available for exhibition purposes, or is this going to become like a product design thing?
The idea was to make it sort of a product design thing. Because again, like I said, I have 30 of these things on the drawing board that nobody's seen.
Okay.
It's just they only saw the 6 that are in the show. So there's tons of these that nobody knows exist. But the whole purpose was to get the ones ready for the show. And then and the other part about it is to get it done at cost and at a reasonable cost. So like part of this may be a different type of material that might have the same gloss, but might not be as heavy as some of the metal nose types of things, you know?
Understood. Well, gentlemen, I'm so happy to have had a chance to reconnect with you, David, because I feel like we haven't spoken or seen each other in years.
In a minute, yeah.
Understanding you're in Jamaica, you're living your best life right now. You're enjoying yourself. It was a pleasure speaking to you both. I'm
Likewise.
proud of both of you. And I want to thank, again, the Broward Division of Cultural Affairs for giving Dominique the opportunity to connect with all of the artists in the exhibition today, for the artists spending time with us to talk about their work. And I want to also mention that the exhibition is up until the 29th. So you have maybe 2 more weeks to see this amazing exhibition. The Porch is the Tree is the Watering Hole. So thank you for joining us and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Puede contratar gratuitamente la firma de lesiones más